So we just got a Lamborghini Aventador in, and looking around the showroom, it was kind of interesting. 3 red Lamborghinis from totally different eras. A Miura S, the original supercar, the Countach, the anniversary style car, which was the end of the Countach era, and then a 2014 Aventador, which again is close to 50 years later. So what you have is the original supercar, 25 years later, how did that car perform? And 50 years later, how far had Lamborghini come in that time period? So let's start with the chassis, the tub, and the body. And it was kind of interesting, this being the first supercar, it really started life as just a chassis, and then the body was built afterwards. A beautifully styled body by Wallace and by Dallara, beautifully penned car by a brand new engineer. But the tub itself was made of sheet steel. It was independent 4-wheel disc brakes, independent suspension all the way around, and a longitudinal 4-liter V12 with a bunch of Weber stacked on top in the back, turned sideways. It was a really cool package, great looking car, weighed about 2,800 pounds, steel and aluminum, those were the ultimate materials back in the late 60s. So then you come over to the era of the Countach, and it finally developed into the later models at the 25th anniversary and just beyond. And what you had is basically a space frame that's tubular, done very much like a race car from that era. Then you had aluminum body slung over top and a little bit of carbon fiber on the later cars and some plastics and fiberglass. Those were the materials of that era. Now this car weighs about 3,500 pounds, a lot more weight, but it also got a 5.2 liter V12. At the end, it was a 4-valve and it was fuel injected. It made some pretty serious horsepower. Lastly, you come to the Aventador. So what did 50 years of technology bring? A carbon tub for starters and heavy use of carbon fiber. It was the way to make chassis super rigid. It was a way to make cars that were super safe. And it was a way to make cars light as possible and as fast as possible. These two cars had 5-speed manual gearbox. This car has a 7-speed ISR gearbox, works really good. Not as good as the brand new cars, but for its time, keep in mind, this is already 10 years old. It was state of the art. For top speed, it was kind of interesting how long it took to get over 200 miles an hour. The Miura made huge news at 171 miles an hour in the 60s. That was an incredible number. And it was, again, called the first supercar. But by 1990 or the late 80s to 25 years later, they were only doing 185 miles an hour, and really horsepower hadn't changed that dramatically. 385 horsepower, 450 horsepower, yeah, it's about 70 horsepower, but keep in mind this car was almost 700 pounds heavier. So horsepower to weight ratio, not that much difference. Maybe a little bit slipperier, so it gets to 185 miles an hour. But again, not a big difference for 25 years later. But then when you get to the Aventador, yes, you have a bunch more horsepower. You have 6.5 liters, 785 horsepower, depending on what model. Let's take the latest and greatest with that 7-speed gearbox, and you're still weighing roughly the same, and you have better aero, better tires, better brakes, better everything. You hit 217 miles an hour. And this car at 217 miles an hour feels a lot slower than that car at 171 miles an hour, I guarantee you that. So now let's talk about production numbers, rarity, and value. 763 Miuras total production, all the models, the P400, the S, the SV, the Jodas. Pretty rare car by today's standard, pretty rare car by sort of any standard. Value-wise, well, these things have just shot up lately in the last couple years, and SV just sold for close to $5 million. I believe that was a world record price. A Joda will bring a little bit more, but let's say for a production car, top of the market is $5 million. So 25 years later, what happens to the Countach? Well, when they first came out, they had a rocket ship ride up to 1990, and then they had a crash, and they really were cut down in value. 1,983 total production of all Countaches. That includes the Periscope cars right up to the anniversary cars. More than double of the Miura, but price-wise, a great anniversary car or a late car like this one with under 1,000 miles, call it $1 million. A Periscope car, the best one in the world, probably $1.5 million. Significantly less, significantly more cars built, so it all makes sense. Both are great looking cars, both have certainly become collector's items. So now how is the Aventador going to fare? Well, they came out in 2011, they were still building them in 2023, they had lots of different iterations. They built 11,831 cars. That is a huge number for a supercar. Again, compared to 1983, or just over 700 cars, that is a lot of cars. So value-wise, they're pretty much still in decline right now. So a used car like this that has 10,000 miles on it is well under $400,000. So bang for the buck, this is certainly the car to own. As far as performance goes, it's the car to own. Looks, well, that's personal preference. Are they great cars to drive? Any one of them is a fabulous, fun car to drive. Let me see what Gary thinks of this one, and then I'll let you know if I think this is going to be a future collectible.
All right, now I get to drive, not the most expensive of these three, but certainly the fastest and definitely the most high performance car. That never gets old. All right. It's like I've got the nuclear codes or something here. So you've got your Strata, your Sport Mode, and your Corsa. As soon as you get out of Strata, the exhaust just comes to life. It's insane. I don't know why you'd ever drive it in Strata unless you were, I don't know, trying to hide from the police or something, but the sound, holy cow. You get on it, oh, it sounds good. You get off the gas and it sounds good. You know, the suspension in this thing is just incredible. Push rod, magnetic adaptive dampers, wishbone suspension. Thing goes around the corner like a dream. Oh, holy cow. Let's get on the brakes here. It stops, I mean, just as good as you'd expect. Just giant carbon ceramic brakes, 6-piston caliper. You know, the car doesn't only look absolutely space age, but it handles that way as well. When you're on the outside as a spectator looking at this car, the most exciting thing is clearly the design. I mean, it's striking. Everyone turns their head, everyone looks, you know, it's a Lamborghini Aventador. But when you're driving the car, oh man. Naturally aspirated 6.5 liter V12. Well, just the raw power and the sound of this car. Yeah, that's the highlight of this thing, for sure. Man, oh man. Listen to that downshift. Just kind of cruising. I mean, the ride is so comfortable and smooth, you forget how much car this is. 509 foot-pounds of torque, you know, 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. An absolute monster. And then you put it into Corsa and Sport Mode and you do a big downshift. And it immediately reminds you how much car this is. Holy moly. You know, I'd say the car is almost scary, but, you know, really well balanced, mid-engine, all-wheel drive. I don't want to say it would be tough to get yourself in trouble, but, you know, compared to some other cars, it would be. Did you hear that?
So after talking to Gary, he certainly enjoys this car. Ton of fun to drive, the fastest car, the best handling car. All the cars have their pluses, all the cars have their minuses. But if you look at it for a new guy coming into the game, under $400,000 for a great looking car, it's gonna have to pay its dues. I think it's still gonna depreciate a little bit more. At some point as it reaches a bottom, which we're probably close to, you're gonna watch for these cars to go up in value. They're not gonna go up as radically as these two cars here, just because of the sheer numbers. But the special editions of the Aventador, watch for them in the future. It might be another 10 years, but they're a car to pay attention to.